Welcome to the At the Coalface podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. This podcast is all about what it's really like in the trenches of digital and e-commerce. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the At the Coalface podcast. And I'm super pumped to be welcoming Mike Angell back to the podcast again. For those of you that follow the podcast, you may have heard Mike and I speak on episode 81 of the podcast when he was still with Carted, and we were talking about the future of commerce, API-driven commerce. And now Mike is one of the co-founders of Fractal, which is a brand new, newly launched gaming NFT marketplace. Welcome to the pod again, Mike.
Thanks, man. It's good to be back, and I guess I feel privileged to be a repeat guest on the show.
A repeat offender. No, it's good.
Exactly.
It's good to have you here, man. You are the first repeat guest I've ever had.
There we go.
First, man, you get the gold star. And I've been wanting to obviously get you on since you first announced Fractal on LinkedIn. And I know you've basically been huddled in a cave for 2 months or a little bit over 2 months, coding away like a madman to get this thing over the line. And you finally came up for a short breather. And I saw you post on LinkedIn today. And I thought, I'm going to strike while the iron's hot. He's clearly on LinkedIn right now. I'll DM you and see if you can spare 30, 40 minutes for me to have a yarn.
Yeah, I'm always happy to have a chat with you. It's always fun. It's been crazy, the timelines we've been delivering. To be honest, I didn't even do my own post. I retweeted the company's post because I couldn't have time to do it myself.
And you have some seriously cool co-founders as part of Fractal. Do you want to, how did you guys tell us a little? I know, but I'll let you tell the story. Tell us a little bit about your co-founders and how you hooked up with these guys. Have you known them for a long time, or was this just one of those fortuitous things that you hooked up with them at just the right time?
Yeah, it was really random. So I'd actually left Carted. And I was actually in Portugal at the time. So David, who's one of my co-founders, who obviously also co-founded Google Drive and Google Fonts. I've known him for a bit longer because he once saw a project I work on and he reached out on LinkedIn and we've been in touch since then. But then Justin Can, who's obviously the co-founder of Twitch, he was new. And then Robin, who also is part of the team, it literally just came down to jumping on a call one day. It was literally, I'm not even joking, it was only one call. And by the end of the call, we were all just, okay, let's just all agree that we're going to build in this space and let's divide it equally and build something. So that's what we did. And then I suppose we didn't really have a great idea what we were going to do. We all knew the Solana blockchain was going to be part of it. And we also knew gaming was going to be a part of it. But then we had some ideas that we needed to even validate that we wanted to do. So as a marketplace, we're also the first aggregator, which means that we also sell all the listings from other marketplaces as well. So that was something we needed to even test out we could do. But yeah, it was literally on one call about 2.5 months ago, and then I started building 2 months ago, and we released it just before the end of the year. So it's been a crazy time. Lots of people don't believe it we did it that fast, but yeah, when you decide on something and just go for it, it's surprising what you can do.
Wow, that is super amazing. And I don't know but I had actually David Wurtz. I had him on the podcast, episode 96, and he was actually talking about Charm, which he founded as well. And so that's a SaaS platform that provides deep research and data on over 2 million D2C e-commerce brands. And investors, et cetera, will use his platform to find the next great DTC brand to invest in, and competitor intelligence and all sorts of other things. Yeah. And he's a very smart cookie, and I had a really good podcast with him. So it's interesting that you hooked up with him. And then Justin, what an amazing trio of pioneers in the e-com space, but also you obviously brought some of your experience from Carted to your new marketplace, knowing that you wanted to take that concept of relisting from other marketplaces on your marketplace. You wanted to, that's effectively what Carted allowed businesses to do, is it's a universal commerce API. And you brought some of that same concept to Fractal.
Yeah, I suppose it didn't even really come from there. I suppose when we really think about like when we're going to launch it, it's whenever you launch any marketplace, you basically go, we're either going to start with zero, which is obviously very hard to build from, or hey, if there's actually a possibility to bring in some of the, I suppose in crypto, they call it inventory. So obviously if you can just, I suppose it's called same in e-commerce, but obviously if you can bring in inventory that right when you launch and it doesn't look like you're empty, it obviously is beneficial. So I guess it actually came from just the discussions on how do we launch and how do we look like that we're actually like a competitor in the space from day one. And to be honest, is that the other secondary reason is that, so we've started with the marketplace, but we're also definitely going towards powering marketplaces within games. So when we looked at it from that aspect, well, obviously when you're a game and you want people to buy obviously assets in game. You want the biggest catalog you can possibly provide. That was definitely a big reason we wanted to do it. And the reason we did it will come out further down the line as we release more stuff. But yeah, it definitely was a core part of making this work, I think.
Man, it's super exciting. Now, for those that are really new to Web3, and obviously I understand a lot of the Web3 concepts, even though I'm not playing in the Web3 space just yet, hard out. I understand a lot of the Web3 concepts because they're built on Web2 concepts. And so the building blocks have been there for a while, as has crypto, as has these altcoins and alt chains like Solana. But I tell you, I've never invested in crypto before, but with this latest massive haircut that the industry has got, I'm seriously looking at investing in some Solana and maybe some Polkadot and maybe a couple of others, maybe a Cardano and stuff like that. I'm not interested in Bitcoin, doesn't interest me. I love the utility of these alternative blockchains, and I love the utility that, in particular, Solana with its TPM rate is just absolutely through the roof. It's virtually zero gas fees, very attractive. And that's what I think is going to give it value over time. It's not just a store of value, but it's the value of the network itself. And I can see Solana just going absolutely crazy. I've heard some of the latest, I guess, apps that people are talking about building out, in process of building out on Solana. And there's some pretty cool use cases out there. What was the process you went through to decide that Solana was the platform you were going to build your application on?
Yeah, so I guess if anyone's ever followed me on LinkedIn, you can probably see how much shit I've given to Bitcoin and probably even Ethereum sometimes. With that said, like, I invested in both when they first came out. But obviously, once you start to see the transaction times and the fees, you start to go, okay, this is never going to be commercially viable for so many industries. That's what I mean. So where this kind of came out is I was talking to David just about Solana in general. So the first conversation about any of this was me and David just talking about Solana. And he said, hey, can you just look into something for me and just have a look at, he actually wanted me to have a look in Solana for something. He was going to invest in a company. He wanted to know a little bit like what my thoughts on Solana were. And obviously the first moment I saw it, like the fees are viable and the transaction time of less than like it's half a second. It's like everything that crypto ever needed to become a commercial success. So like, I definitely think it's going to change a lot of industries now that the blockchain is both fast and affordable. Like a fee, like a transaction fee is less than a cent, I think, currently. So if it only costs you that much, that's on par with what banks are today. And that's what it needs to be able to obviously take down a legacy system.
Yeah, even for someone that doesn't necessarily understand the underlying algorithms of something like Solana, I start looking at these white papers and some of the other publications that these major computer scientists are putting out around this stuff, and then my eyes start to glaze over. So I'm probably not at the same level of understanding around the underlying algorithms as you are. But from a business perspective and from a commercial viability perspective and a tipping point perspective, this all made sense for me as soon as I started reading about Solana and the other blockchains that were available, and these new layer one blockchains that are really starting to take the world by storm, and their associated altcoins, because those are the underlying transactional components of that particular blockchain. I can see why demand for Sol is going through the roof, because obviously Sol is a utility as a platform, as a compute platform, as a database platform, as an authentication platform. It's amazing in what it can do. And therefore, the sheer utility of that platform to me feels like a lot of apps. And when you look at Rust versus some of the other languages that are being used on Ethereum and some of the other blockchains out there, it feels programmers and coders can pretty rapidly adapt their skills. With 2 to 3 weeks worth of effort, they can adapt their skills to Rust, and they can start both contributing to Solana, but also start understanding how apps can get built on the platform.
Yeah, definitely. I think the one thing, like, with that said, the one thing that people probably get the most about Solana, especially new developers, is the Rust. And to be honest, there's so many contracts now that are already written. So that's like probably the last part you want to touch. So nearly every Solana project is now just pure front-end developers building JavaScript, because it's actually got an API into it. So my thing is, it's expanding really fast, because obviously all these front-end devs can now build full-scale applications without ever building a front-end. And for me, that's what Web3's more about than anything. How do you empower people to build stuff without a backend, because you've got a blockchain there to take it away and do all that for you?
And how did you guys collectively decide that this was the app that you wanted to build? Why gaming? Why NFTs? Why this? Why right now versus any one of 100 other things you guys could have built instead?
Yeah, I think it comes from, I'd say a team has a lot to do with it. You got to think Justin comes from Twitch, so he basically knows every gaming company there is. Robin actually came from a company that was acquired by Zynga and then ran Zynga in Asia. So like he knows every contact over that side. And then it's, to be honest, it's a space that's moving first in crypto as well. So it made the most sense to get in there. And to be honest, I don't know, games are the most fun. It's as far as computing goes, as far as entertainment, gaming's probably the biggest segment on the web. So I guess it made sense to start there. And then when you look at the competitive market, there's a lot of people. Obviously, NFTs became popular from like PFPs, which are the images that you put in your profile pictures. But that's just where it started. We definitely see the evolution moving more towards gaming and gaming assets. And then into other industries, obviously, it's already starting to move into e-commerce and healthcare and a whole bunch of other things too. But I definitely think if there's, even when before we started, we actually talked to a lot of the game studios, and there's definitely a big need for there's a big need for some tech in the middle to help them build what they want to build. And obviously the marketplace is only the first step for us. There's a lot of things that we have in the pipeline that are yet to be announced and yet to be released.
And are you still coding this 100% on your own, or have you already started to bring on other developers into the team? What does the team structure look like now? Is it just you and the other co-founders, or are you starting to actually build out a dev team as you did at Carded and other businesses that you've helped to found and or run? Are you building out a dev team as you speak?
Yeah, definitely. So we've already got one, Dan. So he's actually just dropped. So we have a Launchpad product now. So games can obviously do their initial drop on us now. He just built all that out, and we have the first one launching in a week. So he built all that out. We'll keep expanding. We made the decision that I would just build the initial version because in any startup, you want to test the market, see if people actually want the product, how successful it's going to be. I think the one thing we got from the drop that we did was that there's amazing reception for it. We got 100,000 people in Discord, and we got obviously a whole bunch of people on Twitter. And then every game that we thought we might even have to try and get on board, we're all just jumped on board with very little effort. So there was a very good reception to what we were doing. It was only the fact that I was building it out to just prove it out. And now it's about how do we scale this, because it's going to be a huge project. So we're going to build out a full scale team for it. There's already a lot of people we have a big community team already, because obviously we did build up a community really quickly. And then we've already got BD and stuff to obviously talk to games and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's growing really quickly, and we want to keep everything moving fast and expanding as quick as we can.
Wow. So you think you'll stay involved for a while at least on this one? Do you think that this one has enough opportunity and runway associated with it to hold your attention and keep you excited for the foreseeable?
To be honest, I don't get involved in a project that doesn't. I don't feel like that way. That's what I always think, that I'm always in here for the long haul. Whether that happens or not is usually due to external factors more than my decision.
Fair enough. And are you seeing what I'm seeing in the marketplace in general, that I could almost call 2021 the coming of age or the emergence of Web3, at least in common culture, common lingo? Obviously, there was hundreds and hundreds of global Web3 projects that either got announced last year, got hundreds of millions of dollars worth of VC funding, PE, etc., even new funding mechanisms, DAOs, etc. Web3 just went insane in 2021, and it felt like it was a confluence of so many things happening at the same time. One is you have the likes of Coinbase and Binance and all the other major exchanges, the ones that are very regulated, and it gives people a sense of safety, and it lowers the barrier of entry for the common person to be able to invest in crypto and some of the underlying Web3 technologies. But then the announcements of Facebook changing its name to Meta because of the metaverse. Pretty much every major company in the world is now making noises about the metaverse and wanting to create basically the next generation of the internet, which we might as well just call it the Matrix, because that's basically what its logical conclusion. That's basically what it is. And then we have Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard for nearly $70 billion. There's so much hype, I guess, on one hand, and yet there's so much actual, real, legitimate activity happening in the space. Before 2021, I would have said that a lot of this was vaporware and a lot of hype. But now I think we think that it's just buzzwords anymore. There's too many majors putting too much effort behind this for it not to continue growing. Sure, there's going to be bumps along the way, but what was your sense about 2021 in general, about all the underlying Web3 technologies, metaverse, NFTs, blockchain, smart contracts, altcoins, all the rest?
Yeah, so I guess this is one thing I've learned over my career, is that generally if I hear about something, it's very early, and I've learned not to ignore it anymore. You ignore some things, you obviously write them off as valid or invalid. So I guess this is one where I'm realized I'm very early, and now it's gonna scale up to mass adoption. I think every company saw the same thing that we've seen, is that so the same way that status works in real life, for the first time in 2021, we saw the glimpse that actually works in the digital world as well. So like when I talk about status, it's like the reason someone wants a green Lambo and wants to drive it around. It's the fact that everyone can recognize them for something that they, and you come from a digital world. Like when you're in a physical world, the only person that ever sees that green Lambo are the people that you drive around and in like your local community. It's only ever going to be the city that you're in. But obviously when you start talking about it on a digital level, if you basically have the equivalent of a green Lambo online, it means that you can show it off to the entire world. So I guess for me, that's the part that's really emerging, is that people can show, it's not always just status, it's also what I like. So like obviously people that like soccer will have soccer jerseys for their favorite team, and they can only ever show that off within their sort of physical space. But it's like, hey, what happens if we give people like digital football jerseys and they can promote their team online and show their support that way? So I guess it's about really showing who you are in a digital space. And I think that's what's emerging. And I think that's what's going to be the most powerful part of it all. And and that's where games kind of come into it. If I play Call of Duty 8 hours a day, every day of my life, I want to be able to show off that I'm a Call of Duty player and I'm proud to be it. And this is all the shit I've earned from like putting all my time and resources into this game rather than going out and hanging out in the real world, I guess.
Yeah, or in some cases, those people would have a Call of Duty T-shirt as well, a physical one, like in the real world. They'd have all the gear, they'd have all the memorabilia, they'd have the merch. And so what we're effectively talking about is digital merch, is really what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, I guess it's even more powerful than that, because when you think about like Call of Duty player, he probably played for like 6 months to unlock a secret weapon that you can only ever do if you do one mission. Like it's, I suppose the level of credibility is even, it's like the really rare items you get in real life. Hey, you've got that pair of Yeezy sneakers and there was only 10 of them. And the same with the Lambo, you got a Bugatti Veyron. There's only 10 of them in the world. You must be like, you're exclusive. So what we're seeing is these really limited edition items online, really showing that they're actually worth something as well.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's going back to the basics of human psychology, right? We're hardwired to be able to show those things off. It's the same reason why everybody wants the blue tick on Instagram and everywhere else. It's about status. And largely, if we go back to the fundamental base psychology of it, it's about attracting a mate in most instances, right? It's about, hey, we're peacocking because we want to show that we're attractive to a mate. And there's some hardwiring in our biology there that we can't ignore. And regardless of what the genesis of that is, we see it in the physical world, and we're now starting to see it in the digital world, as you say. But what really interests me, because I come at it very much from the e-commerce perspective, the omni-channel commerce perspective, I see smart contracts as a key component of the essential bridge between the physical and digital worlds. So let's say you're as you said, let's say you're right into sneakers. Let's say you're a sneakerhead and you're right into your Nikes and you're right into the super limited edition Nikes. And let's say Nike decides to do an ultra limited edition drop of a shoe. They serialize every component of that shoe, and it's associated with a specific NFT. So when you buy the shoe, they send you the NFT as well. That the ownership of the NFT transfers to you in your digital wallet. And then therefore that NFT can now forever be associated with that exact pair of shoes. And then from then on, Nike can also participate in the secondary market, which they've never been able to do before. So in the smart contract, the rule can be there that says, okay, if you sell these shoes and you want to have the mark of authentication, which is the NFT that goes with it, and you want to sell the shoes, so therefore you transfer the NFT when somebody buys the shoes off you, in the smart contract, it can be a rule that Nike gets 5% or 10% of the secondary sale in the secondary market. And as part of that smart contract, Nike could say, if we make you wait in line for 10 hours at a store for this limited edition shoe and you happen to get it, then maybe what it does is, as part of the smart contract, it allows you to jump the queue the next time as part of the smart contract. So from my perspective, I see almost unlimited uses of the smart contract and its flexibility, such that it can become part of a loyalty scheme. It can be part of, there's so many things that can be done within those smart contracts that you can't do easily any other way, that now we've gone beyond digital art and we've gone to true digital utility. What is your thinking on that?
Yeah, I definitely like both of those use cases are the use cases I see in e-commerce. Obviously, it's obviously showing that you own that pair of sneakers, and like with games like Portals, where you build a 3D world, like you can basically have a room showcasing all the sneakers you own. Something that if you have it in real life, how many people like all these shoe collectors, how many people actually come in to see their collection? Probably like one or two of their closest friends. But obviously online, then you can show off how big your collection really is to the entire world. And then the second one on the I guess that's whitelisting, is like obviously using a previous purchase to whitelist future ones. It literally solves this whole botting unfair like aspect of trading that we haven't been able to do before, because it's just unless you're going to ask people to bring in receipts of previous purchase, which can be cloned and copied, and everyone tries to do weird shit because I've been in that industry before, is that it's the one true way where you can really show people are authentic and they participated and that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's definitely going to change both of those, I think.
And do you see a slow evolution? And obviously, when we get to a place where I was never into modern gaming, and as a result of that, I never got into VR games or even AR-based games where you can look through. I never got into that. When on the very, very rare couple occasions where I've put on these VR headsets, and one was I was interviewing a VR studio owner, game developer, and short film developer, studio owner, and I tried, and that was the very first time when I interviewed him, and this is going back a couple of years ago now. When I first interviewed him and I went to his game studio to do it, or his development studio, I put on these VR goggles for the very, very first time. And I've told this story before, but basically he was designing this experience where it was like a space station experience where you're standing on the edge of the space station on this platform on the edge of the space station and looking out into space. And I tell you right now, when I was in that for the very first time, my hands started to sweat, and it was pretty easy to fool the brain that this was real. And, when we think about what's coming in terms of VR bodysuits, and when we think of olfactory sense, when we think of haptic feedback, when we think of, and ultimately where Elon wants to take us, which is direct brain stimulation and brain computer interfaces, when we think about that stuff, which is pretty mind-blowing for most people that kind of haven't seen this slow evolution over the last 20 years. But ultimately, I see us getting to a place where e-commerce that's quote unquote physical today can move into a digital space that's digitally enriched, that, yes, sure, you can make it look exactly like the digital shopping and engagement spaces of today, but why would you when you can do so much more with them as well? So I've seen some of those early experiences, and I've tried them out with some of the retailers that are doing today, where they're effectively building like a virtual store, a complete VR store, but it's effectively a replica of one of their physical stores. And I'm thinking, that's great, but there's so much more you can do in this space than what you've done. You've effectively just replicated the physical space, which isn't that exciting. But when we get to a place where we can gamify that in-store experience easily in the digital realm and these 3D virtual realms, and there's 1,001 things you can do in those spaces from a retail experience perspective that you simply cannot do in the physical space, I see that eventually supplanting physical commerce, because it will feel real. It will feel as real as physically walking into a store at some point.
No, exactly. Well, you gotta think, if it gets to the point, like VR is obviously expanding so much, it's like there's a point we have to realize is, shit, when do we actually stop operating in the physical space anymore? Because if I can buy, like furniture shops are an example. Like, how many times have you ever bought furniture? You have to have this 3-month wait where it gets delivered to your door. Like the fact that they can sell you the same furniture in 3D, like in a 3D world, and you put it in your 3D world straight away, and you don't have to carry it home because you can just literally just put it in there, because obviously transportation actually works in VR. It changes like your view of things, and even like how people go to work today. If you can go to a virtual office, it's like, why would you bother getting out of bed? And then, to be honest, if you're going into the virtual world all the time, how much does your apartment really matter when you can just put a headset on and be wherever you just like want to be? I think things are going to really change over the next 5 to 10 years. And the fact that we can have these virtual worlds that are just way better than the real world, even though that's creepy and futuristic from you watch movies like this shit when you grow up, but it's becoming a bit of a reality. And I don't know how far it's going to go, but like it can go pretty far.
Yeah, absolutely. And does that concern you at all? Do you have any concerns about that? People wanting that their digital life is so much better than their physical one, that they completely disengage from the physical world and they live in VR perpetually, almost like what a lot of gamers perhaps in their parents' basements do today, but everybody in the world doing that? Do you see that as a risk? Do you see any downside?
I don't, like, there's obviously some factors that would probably be negative, but like you think about it, like it's inclusive of everyone around the world. It doesn't even matter if you had a disability in that world, you don't have to. You can literally be whoever you wanted to actually be. And it's not like you're not getting social interaction. Like, I'm guessing the laws still apply. These virtual worlds have laws and rules. Like everything that's in the real world, you're not actually missing out on, except for probably sunlight. The development of like UV lamps are going to be through the roof, so people don't have to go outside. I don't know. It's, when you really think about it, if it takes off, it's a change of how we do things today.
Yeah, and I guess with COVID, one of the things that I thought of is that the way, in particular, the governments are responding to COVID and seeming in interminable lockdowns forever. It feels when people can't travel overseas, or whatever the case may be, this is almost another use case of VR is to be able to virtually travel to physical destinations around the world, but you're doing it digitally, and that seems like a pretty exciting prospect to me.
Yeah, I think to be honest, that's just the part that I think is going to take the long. Is it like how you actually feel things in the real world? How, even though there are VR bodysuits and that, like actually touching someone like with your hand is a different experience that you can't get as much in VR. So I think and even if you go stand on a beach with your feet in the water, that obviously has a feeling that you can't really replicate in VR today. But obviously, once this first part is solved, and that if that's where everything's going, I'm sure people are going to try and solve that in as many different ways as they can.
Exciting. And from I guess from an e-commerce perspective, how, based on your experience, and obviously you're much more experienced in this than I am, I've really tried to dig in over the last few months quite deeply on the Web3 space, and I definitely see some challenges. I see some limitations there. I see it's pretty frothy at the moment. As you can imagine, there's a lot of money being thrown at the wall just to see what sticks. And there's a lot of projects, I think, that will ultimately go to zero, but there'll be a lot of that will feed the underlying technology in the process of those of the over-the-top projects that end up going to zero for whatever reason. The underlying technology is going to continue to grow. And from your perspective, how soon do you think that Web3 technology in sum total will start to affect actual omni-channel retailers to the point where they actually need to start taking some action on this? Because obviously we've seen Walmart announce very recently that they're going all in on the metaverse, and they're even going to create their own cryptocurrency. We've seen Nike and Adidas and a whole bunch of other manufacturing brands and retail brands start to make big announcements in terms of the trademarks that they're registering so that they can protect their IP in virtual spaces. And there's a lot of movement by some of the world's very largest brands. But what I haven't seen yet is practical application for smaller brands yet. And I think that's a function, as you say, of some of it has to do with the gas fees on Ethereum and the other blockchains that support smart contracts. But it's also a function, I think, of a lot of the major retail and omni-channel tech vendors haven't yet integrated Web3 into their core technology. So therefore, it's hard for brands to onboard. And I almost look at it as like AI, right? So AI has been talked about for a very long time. And even though, for example, AWS offers AI as a service that you can integrate into your applications and into your websites, etc. Nobody does that because it's too expensive and too complex. So what do? They wait for their search and merch platform provider, or they wait for their order management system provider or their ERP provider to integrate AI into those applications, and then they consume them as a business as part of the other business applications that they consume. So do you see that as being an essential stepping stone for some of these Web3 technologies? Is that the vendor enablers that work with retailers have to start thinking about how they can integrate this tech into their technology so that it's easier for businesses to consume?
Yeah, I think it's the same with anything. And I wouldn't even say e-commerce, I'd say commerce, because e-commerce is one of the examples. Like, you got to think before e-commerce came along, everyone had physical stores. And then you're in a situation where e-commerce is taking off, but there's probably not enough providers that will help you go to e-commerce. So then a lot of brands struggle to move across because there's not providers. But the other side of it, I think, is important is there has to be the consumer demand for it as well. So I'd say right now, the only brands that are doing well in Web3 are the ones that are capable, that have strong enough communities to get their consumers to actually want to be in the Web3 space. So like with any tech that comes through e-commerce, it's always the same. It's always the leaders with strong communities, like the really edge case guys that get it first. And it doesn't even when TikTok came out, obviously the brands that jumped on first are the ones with strong communities and obviously understood how the platform worked. And what I think is happening in e-commerce more than ever is the timeline's getting shorter. I remember when Instagram first came out, the first early brands, it was like they got on there on day one, but then it was basically 5 years or so before like the mainstream brands were on board. But then when you saw TikTok came in and it was only probably a year before like majority of brands, or even 2 years before brands were starting to implement it. So I think that's happening in e-commerce is consumers are getting way faster at adopting new tech and jumping onto new things, which is helping. And then vendors are obviously helping brands brands jump on faster. So I think it's all of those things all aligning. And I think I'd have to say Web3 is very early. Like we're like at the stage where only like the most innovative brands or someone like Nike or Adidas that have really exclusive drops can really see the benefit out of it. And then the luxury brands are doing quite well as well. Like Gucci and stuff are doing good partnerships where they can obviously drop in metaverses as well. But that'll come down because obviously once people get these top end brands, they'll want to keep moving on to, hey, what about this? Okay, guys, can you do this? Can you do that? So I think it's always consumer driven a little bit. And then, oh yes, you have to have the tech providers that can make it simple so that it doesn't cost a fortune to get involved.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's almost good in the sense that you, based on where you're at in the industry, because I feel early, but in some respect, as a technical person, I feel very late. So if I compare what and the research that I've done and the understanding that I've garnered, let's say if I look at the last 6 months of time that I've put into this and really with a big focus over the last, say, 3 months, my level of technical understanding of this is reasonably good because I had a pretty good foundation to begin with, so I could pick it up pretty quickly. But compared to someone like you, I still feel massively late. But then by the same token, you're saying we collectively that are maybe more technical in nature are still super early because this is quite technical stuff that's happening here. So I guess it gives me a little bit of I can breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief that we're still early on this bandwagon and we just have so much more room to grow. And I think if we look back on this podcast, which will be released, let's say, I don't know, it's probably be 4 weeks before this one gets released. But if we look back on this a year from now, I think we're going to see so much insane action in Web3 over 2022 that I think we'll look back and we'll say, man, we're really thankful that we were early.
Yeah, I agree. So actually, because Gary Vee came into our Discord and talked to the community, and he put it really well. So like, reality is, if you want to get involved in Web3 now, you have to install this plugin, that plugin. You've got to go into a Discord channel. You've got to do all this weird shit to be able to get involved. I guess he put it really well in the fact that the ecosystem's that early. People are even doing this weird shit to be able to do it. But once some tech providers come in the middle that obviously take away all that complexity and make it so you can basically just click a button to be able to get involved, that's when it's really going to hit mainstream. And from everything I've seen in the space, and I suppose is even what we're building in the space, is we're all trying to make that happen. So I think in the next 6 months, like even us and then other providers in the space are going to be making this stuff so seamless for people that are not willing to commit all that time. Because really, it takes some serious time to know what Phantom Wallet is. Like even Discord, not many people use Discord. Is like to know what all these things are is like too much right now. But as soon as it becomes, oh, hey, I can just go on the Nike website and buy this, that's when it's going to hit real adoption. And you don't have to do like super weird stuff. I think Coinbase did that really well in like Bitcoin buying and trading currencies. But now we've got to see it more in other industries rather than just pure trading. Because I think that's what's happening. It's moving from trading into other industries now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. For me personally, I had never considered buying crypto before because it was a pain in the ass. But I just recently signed up for Coinbase and it was so easy and linked up a debit card and boom, you can start trading straight away. And they even provide a custodial wallet if you need one. And they the wizards that they have, what I found is that the wizards and the contextual help that they provide through every step of the process, right from the point where you create your account, right up to the point where you actually have a crypto wallet and you actually own some crypto, that whole UX UI, I don't know who they have working on the UX UI, but it's pretty slick in the sense that it literally handholds you from the point of knowing almost nothing to being able to trade and own crypto. So to me, that is about as low a barrier entry as you can have in a scenario where it's no longer the Wild West, where Coinbase has to meet all the know your customer rules because it's regulated in the United States, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, they are heavily regulated. And I guess legacy crypto buyers would say that's the antithesis of what we wanted for crypto, which is completely decentralized, no gatekeepers, nobody clipping the ticket, peer-to-peer trading, et cetera. And this flies in the face of that. But by the same token, your average person in the street, they don't want to figure all that out. They're actually prepared to pay a premium for the convenience, the safety, and the security of having a middleman that takes away the pain.
Yeah, exactly. And you can't deny it. Like that's part of our story. We obviously announced that even before we launched, we got someone obviously hacked one of our Discord bots and basically fooled everyone into going to another site and basically our community lost 100,000, which we ended up just taking out of our wallet and paying them. Is what people don't realize that with obviously decentralization becomes, there's no banks obviously insure your bank account. They do all this extra stuff that, although people love the idea of decentralization, there's actually some really big pain points that come out of it. So like people like convenience of obviously the blockchain, and I definitely agree the ledger is great, and like proof of everything that's happened keeps people obviously, it keeps obviously trust in the system. But like there's still going to be places like Coinbase that make it easier and obviously do custody, because the fact I've lost a Bitcoin wallet back in like 2005. It's not nice when you know what that's worth today, but I kind of wish Coinbase basically existed back then so that someone in the middle could have taken that risk away from me, because not everyone wants risk. They just wanted the platform and the benefits of the system. Yeah, I think there's going to be the balance between the two, between centralization and decentralized, is still to be fully decided, I guess.
Couldn't agree more. We don't even know what all the use cases are for Web3. There'll be lots of creative people out there applying their formidable technical and business prowess to the space over the next 12 months in particular. Now, if we wind back to the technical side of Solana and your choice to move on to Solana, you talked a little bit about that. What other alternative level 1 blockchains excite you right now? And what is it about them that, did you look at Polkadot? Did you look at a few others? Did you look at Cardano? Did you look at a few before you settled on Solana? And what, from an investment perspective, or if you look at blockchains that you feel actually have legs for real world application uses, which are the ones out there right now that you see that interest you?
So I'm not going to have a very exciting answer to this because I haven't looked into many. I'm about to, because we're about to look at other chains that we're going to implement. But for me, the size of the chain is we're not trading. I suppose we're not trading, so we don't have to look at it from that aspect. We actually have to look for it from if we were going to use a chain, how many people are already using it and how much is a gaming ecosystem going to survive on it. So Solana was to be honest, it's an easy choice for us because the growth rate was amazing. They're already the 5th, they might be higher now, largest blockchain already out there. And then if we look at the 4 above that, they probably weren't viable. I think actually Cardano is one of the ones above them. That's one I want to look into that I haven't looked into very much. The one that actually excites me is Ethereum 2 is actually like everything Ethereum has planned is actually exciting. I know it's like the only problem is it's like a 2024 release or something. So the timeline is obviously giving a lot of opportunity for other people to come in and take their space, which I suppose Solana is called the Ethereum killer for a reason, in the fact that they're moving into the space before Ethereum's ready to do so themselves. I definitely will keep you updated on this space because I am interested to see like Avalanche. Like I've definitely looked into layer 2 a lot because those guys are making good head spacing. But yeah, I can't be too helpful because I haven't looked into too many of the others. I think if you see the growth in the community really expanding, it's always a good thing to look into further.
Yeah, and I look at their market share in terms of total crypto market share as well. I guess their market cap, basically. And I think that when something reaches $50 billion market cap or more, that's a pretty good sign that it's not going to go away tomorrow. It's reached almost like an escape velocity. And so it gives you enough confidence. And when you look at the number of transactions that are flowing and the number of nodes that are running around the world and their staking mechanisms, and when you start looking at some of the more technical aspects of this, it starts to become pretty clear pretty quickly which ones probably have the chops to last, at least in the medium term. You can't say that they'll be around forever, but certainly have the legs and the runway to get them to a pretty good place, and to have enough runway to get enough applications running on those platforms that the people that have built those applications don't want those platforms to go. And so I think you're right. I think it's going to be really interesting to see which of the other top 10 outside of Bitcoin, because the thing about Bitcoin that I've always had taken issue with is the fact that it doesn't do smart contracts. So apart from maybe perhaps functioning as some kind of e-gold, it doesn't have a utilitarian value because you can't build applications on top of it. And so apart from it, doesn't feel to me like it has a ton of utility value to those people that are wanting to make big change in the space. But all the other ones, all of the other more modern blockchains seem to, at least layer ones, all seem to support smart contracts. And this is where it gets exciting. And when you look at something like Polkadot, which they do chain-on-chain technology, the blockchain of blockchains, and with their parachain concept, it just seems really exciting. Some of the creativity that we're already starting to see in the way in which these guys are funding themselves. They're not going through traditional funding mechanisms. They are doing it completely out, in many cases, they're doing it completely outside of the standard VC or PE models. And therefore, they're almost self-sustaining right out of the gate if they have something that's technically unique and superior that developers can buy into at scale. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Oh, I definitely agree. I'm not going to say I have not considered building a chain before because like the economics of it are incredible and they are self-funding. So it's an interesting space. I definitely think more are going to pop up. And I definitely think even if they're not new chains, probably some forks of the existing chains are going to make sense. Because even like Solana as an example. So like Solana has the actual tech is one thing, but then they also provide parameters on top. What are the fees going to be? What is the transaction fee going to be? So, and even like Ethereum has a decision of what the gas fee is going to be. So to be honest, someone else can come along and go, hey, I love the Ethereum platform, but I don't like the gas fees. I'm going to boot up a version of Ethereum where the gas fees have a different structure than everything else. And technically, they're still viable and they're even commercially still viable. So I think there's going to be a few of those popping up along the way. Yeah. And me on Bitcoin, I don't get Bitcoin. Like they're the number one. Just there has been no innovation out of Bitcoin from the original spec. And I don't know how they got into that position and haven't been moving to actually bring in smart contracts. And they've got they would have the capital to do it. I don't know why they're not expanding in the space.
Interesting. Maybe they're just quite happy to be the e-gold. But I tell you, when central bank digital currencies become the norm, I think they're going to be in a world of hurt. But again, I'm no expert, and this is not investment advice. But for me, that's why for me personally, that's why I haven't invested in Bitcoin, because I think that central bank digital currencies are a Bitcoin killer unless they do something unique that brings some additional value to them over central bank digital currencies. And then we have the risk of someone pulling a China or a Russia where Bitcoin effectively gets banned and they don't have an entry point and exit point into the primary financial system. That is a real issue. And so just overall, I think regulation full stop is probably the single biggest risk to cryptocurrencies full stop and some of the underlying Web3 technologies. Do you see regulation as a potential risk factor? And then the final question that I'll ask you, because I've taken up enough of your time already and I so appreciate it. If someone was new to this whole thing and they've heard the term Web3 before and they want to start learning about it, I'll give you my thoughts, but I'd rather hear your thoughts first on where somebody would begin if they wanted to start understanding this whole Web3 thing. And they go, man, okay, let's say they're an e-commerce manager out there, run-of-the-mill e-commerce manager working for a mid-market brand. And look, maybe they're doing some good work. Maybe they're an omni-channel brand. And so they have some physical stores. They sell online. They sell through a couple marketplaces. And maybe they even do a little bit of social selling. But they've heard about this Web3 thing and they know it's about ready to disrupt their role and their business over time. Where would they get started? But what is your thoughts on regulation first? And two, where does someone start is the second question.
Yeah, I think the regulation is probably everyone's biggest thing in this space. I think the one thing is the US really hasn't made a stance on whether they're securities or not yet. I think the outcome of that will change. It won't really change the tech. It'll just change which companies and how much compliance is involved and how much of a pain it's to do. So I think compliance is still a bit of an unknown, especially it's probably not so much Web3, but it's probably like tokens and IDOs and ICOs and all that sort of stuff is where it gets a little bit gray. So the people actually raising money on using the chain to do so is where it's probably going to get a little bit more regulated. Either way, everyone always finds a way around it. So even if it does happen, there's always a solution. So it's not a blocker. It's just people. To be honest, I feel like the earlier an answer comes out, the better, because then everyone can just adapt accordingly. And then for like people wanting to get into Web3, I don't see it any differently than so being in e-commerce for however many years and obviously seeing all new tech come through, I always apply the same logic. Find examples of people doing it well. So obviously, if you want to get into Web3 and you're in e-commerce, or it doesn't even matter what space you're in, obviously the first thing I always did was go, hey, who's doing well in this space? Okay, Nike, Adidas, they're doing well in the space. I literally just go out and see what they're doing, see exactly what they're doing, what tech providers they're using. And then basically e-commerce is all about, like in every industry, it's all about just replicating. And then obviously throwing a few tweaks on top of it, but 99% of it's all the same. So if someone's doing well in the space because they're doing it a specific way, a lot of times I wouldn't reinvent the wheel unless you're really confident in an idea. I'd be more trying to go, okay, this model works. Let's see if this model works for us. And sometimes it doesn't, and you go out and see, okay, who else is doing what, and then tweak until you find something that fits your audience.
Nice. And do you think that brands of the future, we talk a lot about community, we talk a lot about brand building, we talk about that being the legs of true brand strength and being able to even find product market fit and find brand loyalty and all those things, all those good things, and be able to retain margins and all the rest. We've talked about this for a very long time in our industry. How long do you think it is before every major brand out there runs a Discord or something that is distinctly Web3 today? Because Discord seems very much Web3 focused for the most part, and particularly in the gaming community. But brands are always trying to build communities in new spaces, right? As you said, the smartest brands were on TikTok really early. They were on Instagram late, and they realized that, and they got burnt before. And I think brands are watching Web3 closely, and they're watching not just the tech aspect and not just the commercial aspect, but the community aspect as well. And they're going, man, maybe we were even late to e-commerce and we got burnt. Maybe we were late to social, we got burnt. Maybe we were late to mobile, we got burnt. And so we are not going to be late to this thing because we know it will burn us if we do. And so do you see brands starting to try to wedge their way or create communities in spaces that were traditionally Web3 spaces like Discord, even before they have a use case for Web3 in their business?
Oh, after Fractal, we obviously run a big Discord community. After doing it, I'm like, brands should definitely be like, Discords are so active and they're real time and everyone's in there just chatting. If as a brand, if you can go build a Discord community right now, I would do it instantly, and there's already a market for it. I think the really interesting thing that's coming out of these Web3 is that there's actually a new wave of companies coming out, and that's where part of the community is starting to have ownership over the brand a little bit. So when we talk about token drops now, a lot of them, the token drop is for equity in the company. So what I probably see in e-commerce maybe happening a little bit is a sneaker company could come out where they drop an NFT collection, they get all their founding members, and as part of that, all those founding members own part of the profits from the shoe company. And that's when the Discord communities and Web3 really excels, is because people have a sense of ownership over now the brand that they're wearing and supporting. So I guess I see that's something that might change, especially maybe in e-commerce, is a wave of, we obviously just went through the whole D2C e-commerce brands, but I think we might go through the wave of Web3 commerce brands where they're actually partially owned by their community, or at least they let the community vote on their direction, because that's another common thing, is that as an NFT owner, you actually get voting rights on, hey, what's the next product release going to look like and all these sort of things. So I think that's probably one of the interesting things, is we might see a few brands that are actually truly community owned and driven a little bit. So
maybe the analog then is, in a Web 2 world, it was D2C direct to consumer. In a Web 3 world, it's D2C direct to community.
Yeah, exactly. I suppose that community even tries, you basically have a marketing department that's community, which people are, even when they're actually financially incentivized as well, or people obviously shout 10 times louder than when they're not. So it's an interesting concept that might come into that space.
Again, I thank you for your time. I know that you were head down, bum up for a couple of months there, just coding like a madman, trying to get Fractal out the door. I consider you a friend and an industry colleague. I super respect what you do. I love your personality on LinkedIn and how transparent you are. I love the fire and the commitment and the passion you bring to our industry. You've done so many things already. You're still pretty young. You're younger than me, and you've obviously got a long time to go in this space. And I love it. I love how disruptive you have been already in our industry, and I love how disruptive you no doubt will continue to be. And I look at you as a true pioneer in our space, and it's just so cool to have the friendship we have. And I look at you as a super early adopter, even well before me in many instances, and I definitely consider myself an early adopter. So it's exciting, man. It's exciting to watch your moves in this space and how you're just willing to, you don't go out there to offend people, but you're not afraid of shaking a few trees and ruffling a few feathers. And I absolutely respect and love that about you. And I wish you and David and Justin and everybody else involved with Fractal, I wish you guys every success. It's super cool to watch you making these big moves, and to have that really early success, I think, is so well earned and so well deserved. I hope it continues for you, man. I think you deserve it.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. You can get sometimes you just feel like a crazy person with crazy ideas sometimes. So it's good to know people it's good to actually pull it off as a success sometimes. And I hope there's going to be another one of them. So
I'm sure there'll be many more. I'll be watching with great interest, as will the whole audience here. Thank you again for coming on the pod and sharing some time with me. And yeah, I know you're based in the UK at the moment. I know it's getting late for you there. Thanks for sharing time with me, man. We'll talk again, hopefully very soon.
Thanks, man. Love chatting.
Thanks for listening to the At the Coalface podcast. If you want more At the Coalface, you can subscribe to our premium e-commerce and digital newsletter, At the Coalface Digest.